Okay, so today what I wanted to chat about is I've talked about soft pastels before being my favourite medium, but I wanted to do a bit of a deeper dive into soft pastels sort of and how they're made and why they're so amazing. So that's our Tuesday chat this morning. We're going to deep dive into soft pastels. They're quite often misunderstood. So I want to squash those myths as well, that they're chalk. I hate it when people say that, chalk, they're talking about, and it's like, no, they're nothing like chalk. So today we'll talk about what soft pastels actually are, so how they're made, that they're not chalk, how they reflect light and produce such brilliant colour, the difference between soft pastel and oil pastel, because I do get that asked that a lot as well, and then the various forms you can get them in and how different brands vary in softness. Okay, so whether you're new to soft pastels or you've been using them for a while, I'm pretty sure there'll be something here that I talk about that will give you a better understanding of why they're so special. Okay, so I'm just going to put some good mornings out. Hi, Holly and Andrea. I think everyone's a bit slow getting on today, and I've got to keep checking Instagram. All right, Marianne's on as well. Morning. All right, so yes, so soft pastels. I'm going to share a little bit of a video as well, so hopefully that will work, but I'll do that a bit later. All right, so how soft pastels are made. So we'll start at the beginning. So they're made by combining. I can't talk this morning for some reason. So they're made by combining pure ground artist pigments with a very small amount of binder. So usually a gum arabic or a gum tragacanth, I think you call it. So the goal is to use just enough binder to hold the pigment together in a stick form without dulling the colour. Okay, so all pigments are blended with different mediums. So your watercolours, your acrylics, your oils, they've all got medium added to them to the pigment to create the type of medium it is. And soft pastels have the least amount, so it's the tiniest amount just to get them to hold into a stick. So of course your pigments are a powder. You can even make your own pigments by grinding down different bits of earth and stuff. So it's a powder, so it needs something to hold it together. So once it's mixed into like a dough-like paste, the mixture is either rolled by hand or extruded into molds to dry. And then that's it. There's no heating, no drying ovens, no harsh chemicals. And because the binder is minimal, the soft pastels remain dry, powdery, and intensely pigmented. And that's what gives them the velvety texture that we all love. Okay, I should have bought a drink. My dad's going to tell me I say that every time. All right, so why soft pastels are not chalk, and that don't ever let anyone tell you you're painting with chalk, because they're not. So it's a common misconception, I suppose, because they look like a chalk stick, that we all used as kids. And when you put them on a bit of paper or whatever, they kind of have that consistency a little bit. Some of the harder ones maybe, but the softer ones definitely not. So it is a misconception to call them chalk pastels, which you do hear people say that, but they're not chalk at all. Chalk is made from calcium carbonate, so like your blackboard chalk, and it's mixed with colorants. So it's cheap, dusty, and not light fast. And sometimes I think I was told they even use like a concrete sort of powder, which is probably what the calcium carbonate is. It's like concrete. So yeah, so definitely not the same thing. Soft pastels are made almost entirely of the artist grade pigment. So that's the huge difference, and there's no filler. So oh my god. So while chalk fades and feels dull, soft, it feels really dull, like soft pastels are really luminous and rich. So if you've never used soft pastels, you might not realize there's difference. But if you've used soft pastels and good quality ones, you'll know there's a huge difference between those and like your colored chalk. It's kind of, yeah, it's like comparing kids' sidewalk chalk that you use, on your blackboards and on the pavement, against high quality art paints. So they're completely different. All right. Now, this is always fascinated me, why the soft pastels are so bright. And they are the brightest medium. So I've used all different mediums, and I know you can get bright colors in all different ones. Maybe not so much with oils. Oils always seem to be a bit duller for some reason. I'm not sure why. Again, it's probably to do with what mediums they're mixed with. Acrylics do appear a bit brighter, but nothing is as bright as a straight soft pastel. And the reason for that is when they're viewed under a microscope, the pigment particles appear with many little facets, so similar to a diamond. The facet structure allows the pastel pigment to reflect light, creating that luminous and brilliant effect. And the soft nature of the pastels means they contain more pigment and less binder compared to harder pastels, leading to a more vibrant and intense colours. So the softer the pastel, the more pigment, which reflects that light. Okay, so they're not smooth, so they have that like a crystalline structure, and it's like little prisms that are reflecting the light everywhere. So we can't see that, of course, with our eye, but under a microscope you can. So it creates that real vibrancy and luminosity in your pastels. So because that pigment sits on the surface of the paper rather than soaking in like a paint would, then that light reflects directly off the pigment. So, and that's the reflection that makes it glow. Okay. So it is definitely the most vibrant medium out there. And some museums actually will only show pastel artworks for a limited time because that brilliance is sensitive to light. I know a lot of artists that have sold paintings, or a collector will put that like a museum grade glass over them to try and protect them even more. But in saying that, they do last, years and years and years. Some of the old masters pastel work is still quite bright in pigment, and because they are such strong pigment, they'll last your lifetime. Okay, but yeah, I mean the museums, of course, can be a little bit over and above, but definitely if you have a pastel in your home, just normal glass, as long as it's not on a wall that's getting direct sunlight on it. Okay, so those light reflective qualities is part of what makes the pastel paintings look alive. So it's also why layering matters, so you can build that glowing color from the bottom up. But you will also, because of that, so if you understand that they have these little, when you lay a bit of pastel down and it's got all these little teeny diamonds in it, essentially, you'll hear a lot of pastel artists say you should not blend. Okay, and they're usually pastel artists that work entirely with sticks to try and get that brightness. And you can imagine the minute you blend, you're squishing those little diamonds, essentially. So by blending, you are making them not as bright and not as luminous and not going to reflect that light as much. Okay, but in saying that, pastels can be used in so many different ways that I blend all the time, and I still find my pastels are quite bright. Maybe they're not glowing. I have seen some pastel artists work that just work in sticks. Their paintings do glow. Especially there was a fellow at Redcliffe, I cannot remember his name. He always did his pastel paintings building up small little marks with sticks, and he used to draw boat harbours and the water, and on black. He always did it on black paper, and they just glowed absolutely gorgeous because he refused to blend. And you'll get, so when you hear a pastel artist say no, don't blend it, it's because they're trying to keep the brightness to their pastels. Okay, so I blend all the time. All my backgrounds are blended because I want them to have a really soft blurry look, and I find that's the best way to do that, is to blend. So I usually layer it though. So I start with the sticks and blend, and I do a block in and I blend. And then I use pencils a lot to build up my work, which pencils are not as bright as sticks. But then at the end, you can come back in with the sticks to add highlights, or if you want some brighter colors added. I always tell my students, your sticks are always the brightest. So for highlights, things like that, you can always come back in. But if I was trying to paint something really bright like a flower, then maybe I'd use more sticks and try not to blend as much on those final layers. Okay. But yeah, it depends what you're after, I suppose. So I do have a couple just here to show you. So this one here, this is my typical way of painting with pastels. So the background is done with sticks, but I've blended with a sponge tool. I use a sponge tool because I use pastel matte paper. Fingers don't really work on pastel matte, so a sponge tool I find works really well. So I've blended that background, and because it's water, I'm sure you could do it just in sticks and get it brighter, but I like that softer blended look. So, but you can see it's still blue. It's still quite bright. It's probably just isn't as bright as if it was just solid sticks. And then I do the details in pencil. But then I came back over where I want any brighter areas. I'll then come back over and add some sticks. So, whereas this one that I did the other week in a workshop was just sticks. This artist, Elena Charalova, she just uses sticks. She doesn't blend because she likes to keep that luminosity in her work. So I don't know if you can see the reds in that on here. They really are glowing, like I don't know if you can see it on the camera, but here, because they are just straight stick on there, the brightness is huge. Whereas if I blend those, it's going to dull them down a lot. Okay. Lynn, how do sticks compare with PanPastels? Oh, here's a question. Are they as bright? No, I think PanPastels wouldn't be as bright. Yeah, of course, I'm going to mention PanPastels a bit later, but in the pan, they're bright. But again, because you're putting them on with a sponge, you would be squashing that brightness. So even if you like using pans, I would 100% still have sticks to do some finishing touches to try and brighten up some areas. So I'm going to try and share my screen here. I'm not going to put... I'm not going to play this whole video. I will put the link into the chat here for this video because it goes for 15 minutes, but it is well worth the watch. It is, a lot of my students would have already seen this. it is the Henry Rocher. I'm not sure.
In their liquid form,
Pause it. Let me come back here for a second. I don't know if you guys are going to be able to hear the sound, but that probably won't matter too much. I'm just going to show you the first little bit. It's just like the intro. So this is Pastels.
In their liquid form, pastels look just like paint.
So yeah,
but Margaret's goal is to drain the moisture, turning this bright blue blob into some of the most renowned pastel sticks on the market.
And this is
La Maison du Pastel, founded by Henri Rocher, has been making them the same way for 300 years.
Making place, and this is
these drawers store hundreds upon hundreds of colors, with only slight variations between shades, some only a trained eye can see. But a premium pastel business is hard to sustain. Pastels aren't as popular as other fine art mediums like oil paint. So for years, the business struggled to find and keep its customer base. Today, its two co-owners work tirelessly to keep this centuries-old tradition alive, without sacrificing the quality the Maison is known for. So how is this niche art business still standing? Isabelle Rocher, a relative of Henri.
I need to stop sharing. Come back here. All right, so I've put the link to watch that video in this chat, okay? So maybe before we finish today, just click on that link and open it in a new tab so that you can watch it after. It goes for 15 minutes, but it's well worth the watch. So, oh, thank you, Odette. You like my technique. Yeah, I do too. And that's the beauty of soft pastels. Oh, the sound was on? Okay, cool. All right, great. Great. All right, I just don't want to sit and let you watch the whole 15 minutes because you can do that in your own time. But a lot of my students have already seen that video. And, yeah, it's very cool. The whole story about how the Henry Rocher's daughters, I imagine they were, inherited it, took it over, kept it going, but they got to their 80s and it was declining badly. They weren't, as customers were dying, like everyone was getting older, they were not advertising to get new clients at all. So, and they hadn't built up a stockpile of pastels or anything. Whereas this is their niece took it over and she has brought it back to life. And yeah, but still using the same machinery, like that press that you saw in there. That's like, yeah, back from when Henry Rocher and his son first made like the shop and everything. That's what they used to use. Very, very cool. So yeah, definitely worth watching. But we'll go into how sort of a bit more about the pastels in a minute. First of all, just wanted to mention soft pastels versus oil pastels. It's another thing I get asked all the time. Are they the same as oil pastels? And it's like, no, no. So they're completely different. So soft pastels are dry, dusty, and they blend beautifully. So you can layer them, blend them with your fingers or tools, and create rich painterly effects. Whereas oil pastels are made with wax and non-drying oils. So they feel more like a crayon. And they sort of stay wet to the touch and they don't blend the same way. So you can't layer as many oil pastels because they eventually like resist each other. So they also don't have that light reflection quality that soft pastels do. Okay, so they are completely different. I've never used oil pastels except maybe when I was in primary school. You know, they seem to be the kids sort of that crayon-y type thing. But yeah, so completely different. And you would have you would use completely different techniques too. So as much as all pastels are probably a perfectly great medium to use, because you can get artist quality ones, of course, but it's just not something I use, and it would be different techniques. I wonder what non-blending of sticks would look like on portraits. Absolutely beautiful. So when we say using sticks and not blending, how you know, it's a bit like oil painting. When you step back from an oil painting, like, okay, an oil painting, you know, when you get right up close to an oil painting, you can really just see the marks, and sometimes it different styles of oil paintings, but you can just see the marks, and it doesn't really make a lot of sense until you step back, and then it all comes together. Well, pastel sticks work similar way in that. So you can use very small strokes to create a smooth effect when you're standing back, and it's not until you walk up close to it that you'll see all of those little marks. Okay, so it doesn't have to be big, fat, like blocks of stick. You can use really small marks. So it's a bit like that, large to small. So when you first start off, you're doing bigger strokes, and then as you get into the details, you're starting to refine it and use smaller strokes. So I do this a few times, which I really enjoy. They're like, I call them a block stick painting. So we've done a Highland cow, and I've done a range of dingoes as well, where I've just used sticks and no blending. And they're bright. They're really bright, and they're beautiful. And it's a fun way to do it. So definitely, if you do have pastels and work in pastels, maybe try a few different approaches and see if you can see the difference in brightness to how, say, you wouldn't, maybe if you normally blend like I do, to then compare it to one that you've just built it up with sticks alone with no blending. And I know it is very hard for someone who blends a lot to not blend. It is very hard. I've watched quite a few students when I've given them the exercise to do a painting just in sticks, no blending, and there's quite a few that cannot do it. They have to get in there with their fingers and blend, and that is fine if that's your style, and you just go with it if that's what you want to do. But it is a good exercise to see the difference in like that brightness and luminosity. So, all right, so we've got different forms of soft pastels. Oh, got itchy nose. So of course we've got our pastel sticks, you know, which I've got quite a few different ones here. I'm going to go through sort of which are softer and harder. So they're your sticks. So this is your soft pastel sticks that we've been talking about mainly. Then of course, they're the most sort of common form, and you'll find a huge range in there. Like I think in that video, Henry Rocher was saying, she was saying that I think they're going to nearly hit 1,000 different shades of color, I think. They're like, so that's just one company. So all the different pastel companies create all different colors. So every single color from every different company is going to be different. Okay, so they might call it the same, but it will be different. It won't look the same. So they're probably the most common, and some are hand rolled, like Sinelli. I'll go through which are hand rolled and that, and some are machine made. Okay, and then you've got your pastel pencils, of course, which are here. So these are a pastel core encased in wood. So the pastel is usually a harder pastel to stop it from crumbling inside the pencil. So they're great for fine details, and to make them, they put the core in there and put the wood encasing, which we'll go into that a bit more detail as well. Okay, but again, they come in different variations of hardness. Okay, but they will always be a little bit harder than your pastel sticks, so that they don't just break all the time. And then, of course, there are PanPastels. Okay, these look like a makeup pan, and have to be applied with a sponge or a tool of some sort. Okay, they're less dusty. They're good for blocking in backgrounds, but I'll get into that. And then, so they can all work together in one single piece. So I know a lot of people that use the pans, the sticks, and the pencils. I use sticks and pencils all the time. I don't use pans at all because I do have quite a lot of PanPastels. I just don't use them a lot. So the way I work, like I said, I do the sticks for the background and a block in, like an underpainting. And then I use the pencil to build up like fur detail and the eyes, all that sort of stuff. Okay, so your soft sticks, we'll go back to them. Oh, hold on, Lynn. Morning, Joe, as well. Which brand do you like best of sticks? Well, I'm going to go through the sticks, but my all-time favorite is Schminky. And a lot of people don't, well, not that, no, a lot of people like them, but a lot of people don't use them much, only for finer details because they feel they're too soft, and they're expensive. But the texture can vary a lot between all the brands. Okay, so the very soft, I would say, are the Sennelier and the Schminky. So this is a Sennelier. I like to put pastel on my hands. So they're not as soft as the Schminky, but I would put them in the soft range. The Schminkies, which this is the Schminky here. Hold on, I'll grab. So this is the Schminky here. These would be machine rolled, but we'll go through that as well. So there's the Schminky, very soft. What else? Blue Earth. These are Blue Earth. These are beautiful. They come in little boxes like this, but they're color coordinated. Mine are a bit mixed up. This is a landscape set, but you can get all blues or all reds or all browns, and they just look beautiful in the box. But these, again, they're only little, but again, they're very soft. Okay, and then I would also put Art Spectrum. They do two types of pastel, but this one, Art Spectrum Extra Soft, it's a block, and again, it's very soft. And these are great for backgrounds because they're a block. So if you've got a large background, you can really get going on it without using all of your pastel up. So there are also a lot of artists would use those for finishing touches, or bold mark making. I love them for blending on pastel matte. Okay, if you use sanded papers, they're probably too soft. Okay, and they would then be used for those finishing highlights because the softer the pastel, the more pigment is in it, so the brighter it's going to be. Okay, so I always recommend my students, if they find the Schminkies are too soft, at least get a white or something bright that you can add some little finishing touches in that Schminky or in one of the soft ones. But because I work on pastel matte, if you're used to pastel matte, you'll know it doesn't blend very well to start with. So you need to build up a couple of layers. Now, the harder sticks are fine, but you just need a few more layers, whereas I find I can do a whole background in only about 2 or 3 layers when I'm using the Schminkies. Okay, so I really love them for that. And they don't, even though they're so soft, they don't really clog my paper when I'm doing a block in. So I use Sennelier and Schminky, and then I use those Art Spectrum Extra Soft. So they're all probably my favorites. And then we start to go down to the medium softness, which are probably a lot more versatile, because that way you'd use them on the sanded papers and they would still work fine on pastel matte. So that's where you've got your, you've got Rembrandt is one, Art Spectrum. This is the standard Art Spectrum stick. this is the extra soft. Okay, but you'll see they come off all right, but they're just, when you'll see they're not as soft. And then you've got Unison. I would put Unison in that category as well. So Unison are a very nice stick. They're sometimes classed as extra soft, but I don't think they are. I feel they can be a little bit scratchy, so I would put them in medium. And then the Mount Vision, I think I've got it nearly every pastel made. Mount Vision, again, a bit like, they feel like a Unison. They're soft, they're still nice, but not quite as soft. And then this one's a Diane Townsend, again, still soft, but just not quite. And then you then go into your harder sticks, which are like your Contis, and Faber-Castell do a hard one. And these are really, really hard. Okay, so like I can't even hardly get that to work on my hand at all. Okay, so they're really hard, and they have their own uses as well. So they, could be good for if you need to do really fine lines, maybe. They're less crumbly, I suppose. As you can see, I've had this set for a long time, years, and I haven't used it. So I don't really use those at all. I used to, when I worked on sanded papers, I used to use them a little bit for doing first strokes, like those first layers of first strokes. But now I use pastel matte. I find they just don't work for me anyway on pastel matte. So yes, Anne, extra soft pastels, the Arts Fraction ones are made in Australia. Yeah, very much. I'll mention that a bit later too. Yeah, it is good to know we do have one form of pastel in Australia. I don't think we have many others. So so they're all of your different softness. So depending how you work, like I said, if you work on sanded papers, definitely those middle range are going to be better. So the Unison, the Mount Vision, the Rembrandt, Art Spectrum, Standard, all of those. But it's just good to have a range of them all. So like I said, for blending purposes, then definitely the softer ones for on pastel matte. But again, if you don't want to blend, then maybe those middle ones are better as well. But like I said, have a range of them. And just keep in mind, the softer it is, the less additive has been added. So the softer it is, it's got more pigment. Okay, so which will be brighter. Okay, same goes for the pencils too. So they're all varying as well. So anyway, so I thought this was interesting. Some hand-rolled pastels. They're often prized by artists because they're just beautiful. And they always seem to have a higher pigment load in them, and which, again, brighter colors. So these are pastel brands that are still hand-rolled, or they're using a traditional small batch technique, so not big machines, So the Mount Vision, which were these ones here, they're quite a big fat pastel, actually, and they're handmade in Florida. Quite a few of these are done in the USA, actually. So they're known for rich pigment and large size. So again, great for doing big areas, like if you need to do a big background or something, and you're worried, like some of the, say, a schminky or something that's too soft for that, you would eat it away in no time, whereas the Mount Visions are nice and big and chunky. And then Blue Earth, these ones I was showing before, they're made in the USA. Now, it says these are hand-rolled in small batches, which they probably could be, but they're little rectangles. So they probably hand-roll them, and then they probably have, like if you watch that Henry Rocher video later, they probably flatten them with blocks of wood or something to get them into a square shape rather than that round shape. So they're known for their perfect value-based color arrangement and their compact square shape. They're tiny. They're expensive because they're tiny. And they're very soft. It's, you know, I think they're equally as soft as the Schminky. So because these are so small, it makes them very expensive. But they are absolutely beautiful. Then there's Terry Ludwig pastels, that's USA as well. I've never tried one actually. They're square pastels, handmade in Colorado, and they're supposed to be really creamy and like really soft. And there's over 700 colors in that range, and they're really popular with realism artists. And I know he has there's a purple that you can't buy. Well, you can buy it overseas, I think, in the US singly, but here in Australia you can only buy it in a set. They don't send them here by single colors. I think it's called eggplant or something like that, and it's a really deep purple that, like, everyone treasures it. Apparently it's supposed to be the most amazing, probably shadow color or just using this particular purple. But I've had my eyes on a set that has this purple in it actually, that, you know, maybe when I sell a painting next, I'll buy one. I'll buy this set because they're again pretty expensive. So and then there's Great American Artworks in the US. They're hand poured and shaped rather than extruded. They're very soft and velvety, similar to Sennelier, and they have high pigment saturation. I've actually not heard of those ones. And then, of course, Henry Rocher Pastels in France, which is the one I've shared the video. For those that have only just joined me, there's a link for a 15-minute video to watch how the Henry Rocher, the two ladies, still run it in the same shop in Paris and hand create all the pastels. It's amazing. So they're pretty much the oldest pastel makers in the world, and they're still hand rolled since 1720. That's how long they've been going. So it's now third generation. Extremely high pigment concentration. They're ultra premium. They were used by Degas and other historical masters, and they're very expensive but highly coveted. So to have that as your, portfolio, that, these pastels were used by, the some of the masters, is like pretty cool. And then, of course, we have our Art Spectrum Extra Soft, which are these block ones I was showing. These are handmade in Melbourne, and so Australia. Still Australian owned and made, which, all of us Australians know that is a rare thing nowadays. They also offer the hard stick in their range, but the hard stick is machine made, okay? These are handmade. So that's probably why they're so much nicer and softer. And then, of course, there is also the Diane Townsend, which you can tell, I haven't really used this much. That's kind of the shape they come in. They're a bit grittier, which I'll agree with that. Plein air artists seem to love these, and these are just, and they're only little. They're a bit chunky, whereas depends how you use your pastel sticks too. I quite often, like, when I get these sort, I break them so that they're smaller and I've got edges, whereas these are very fat and a bit hard to break. And so you need an edge. So I don't really, I bought a few of those, but I probably won't buy any more because they weren't my fave. They were right though. And then, of course, these brands aren't entirely hand rolled, but they still use some of them are. So you've got Sennelier, which are mostly machine extruded now. And you can tell the Senneliers are the way they seem to be. They're all exactly the same length, and they seem to be, I don't know, the way they're sort of cut at the ends seems a bit funny. But they still use traditional methods. And then of course Unison. So it's always described as handmade, which each stick is hand formed and rolled, though the initial mixing may involve machinery. Okay, whereas if you watch that video, you'll see the Henry Rocher, they hand mix everything, which I think all of these other ones I just mentioned probably hand mix as well. Whereas Unison, I know they hand roll. One of my students went to the Unison factory there in the UK, and they do tours, and you can watch them make the pastels over there. So they definitely hand roll them all, but there is a little bit of machinery involved. Okay. And there's many more pastel brands. Those were just the ones that are still using old traditional methods. Okay. So let me know. Someone asked, Lynn asked me, was it which brand I like the best? So let me know if you have a favorite pastel brand and why, whether you like them harder or whether you like them softer. Again, it's personal preference. So, all right. And then we have our pen. I was just going to quickly go into how the pencils and the pans are made as well. So the pencils, it's the same with anything, I suppose, any pencil. So you can look up, Google how pencils are made, and you'll see they're all done by machine, of course. And it's the lead, so the core of it, is finely ground pigment that's added with some binder added to it, but a little bit more binder than in a stick, of course, because they've got to be a bit harder being in pencil form. Even though I must admit my Stabilo Carbothellos have less binder, I would say, than a pit pastel or a Derwent, because the Carbothellos are definitely softer. The same with the Caran d'Ache, they're softer. And you can tell because they break all the time when you're trying to sharpen them, whereas the Derwents and the pits won't break as often. Okay. But again, it's what you like. I love Carbothellos, are my favorite because I think they're the right amount of softness for what I like. The Caran d'Ache, I think, are too soft. I don't like them very much. But again, they're good for highlighting because they are softer. I like Derwents are great because they've got a huge range of different colours. They're a little bit different to the Carbothellos. And pits. I put pit and Derwent pretty much on the same level. But yeah, so the lead is the pastel sort of core, and then the pencil, the wood is in half and they glue it together. So it's like a half pencil, and then they drop the lead in it, and then the top comes on and it's glued together. Okay, so it sort of encases that lead. And then there are, you'll know, I know Carbothello are, because you can sometimes tell when you're sharpening or if they break. Some of them, instead of a solid core, some of them have it's split in half. So the actual lead in the middle is made of two halves, and that's glued together as well. And then the wood is in two halves that's glued together. So if they break, sometimes you'll see there's like a perfect split up the middle of your lead when you're sharpening or when it breaks, and that's because that's where it's been glued together. So I don't know why it's in two halves like that. It's obviously the machines they're using or the process, whether it's supposed to make them a bit stronger, I'm not sure, but I don't think it does. I feel like that I have had, sometimes it happens a lot with the ivory. It's a pale sort of cream, and I've had one that every time I've sharpened it, it just keeps snapping, like that, it goes in half down the middle, and it's as though the glue that glues the two together didn't work. So it was a complete waste. So yeah, sometimes I think I wish it was a whole solid lead in there in the Carbothellos, but obviously I don't know why they do it, but they do. So and then PanPastels. These again are started with finely ground pigment. they use a small amount of binder, enough to hold the pigment together without making it hard or crumbly. Apparently it's less than what's used in stick pastels, which helps keep the color super rich. Okay, because if you see, this one's not a bright one, but some of the PanPastels, they are so bright. So the pigment is mixed and compressed into these cake-like pans. So it's pressed in, just similar to how makeup or even watercolor cakes are made. So it's done without sort of fillers, only that initial bit of binder, and it makes them really concentrated and smooth. And then these are just dry pressed, and it also gives them that, by being dry pressed instead of some pastels involve a wet extrusion, whereas these are just dry, and that makes them more silky and less dust. Okay, but you do need a sponge tool or something to be able to get them out of there. I'm not a big fan, like I said, because every time I've tried using PanPastels, I would never do a full painting in one, because I like to use my pencils and the sticks. But when I have tried doing a block in with the pans, I struggle. My pencils don't seem to work over the top. Okay, it seems to fill the tooth easier, and I don't know. I would have thought it would have been the opposite. I thought because these are so fine, it wouldn't fill the tooth and I'm talking pastel matte here, but I think because it is so fine, it does fill the tooth, and I struggle to get my pencils to work over the top the same way I normally do. So my normal routine is to use just a bit of pastel stick. I don't get too carried away with it, doing a block in and then blend it all in with my sponge tool, and then also blend it in with my finger to make sure it's fully into the pastel paper. Because if you pastel matte is kind of, they say that under a microscope looks like Velcro, the hard side of Velcro. So you've got to get that pastel down into it so that you can then bring the pencils over the top. But I have found every time I've tried using the pans, I can't get the layering of the pencils the same way as I can with the sticks, which is very strange. But yeah, that's how I found. I know a lot of others use pans all the time and don't have that trouble, but it's just something I find is what happens with me. How do you sharpen your pastel pencils? This is such a great question, Evelyn. Ask anyone else on here, and they'd be frustrated too, because I've got every pencil sharpener ever made, and I still go back to, I don't have it here, a knife. A knife, that's it. A knife. You can also use a knife, and if you need a little sanding block to get a sharper point, I don't bother with that. I just use a knife. I can control my knife enough to make it have a sharp enough point. But with pastel pencils, it's not like colored pencil. You don't need a really hard, sharp point. They're as sharp as I would ever probably need a pastel pencil, unless I was trying to get right in some tiny little point. But 9 times out of 10, oh, it's gone blurry now. Sorry, the camera, it can never keep up when I do that. But that's about how I would normally have my pencils. So, but yeah, the crank handle ones, the swordfish is a really good crank handle one. But because I use Carbothellos, if you were using Derwent or Pitt, you would not have a problem. They would be great. But the Carbothellos are a bit softer and they seem to break a lot. So I think any movement in one of those crank handled sharpeners, I don't know where all my sharpeners are gone because they're usually around here. Any movement, I think, can cause the lead to break. So I'll quite often, even I got on Temu and bought a bag of 100 little sharpeners like this. So that's what I take to art class So all my students, I just have these, and the minute they've lost their sharpness, they go straight in the bin. So the sharper your little pencil sharpener, the better they're going to sharpen, of course. The little generals are really good as well. They're a little red general sharpener, but similar to that. Stabilo have their own sharpeners, which are excellent. But again, the blade, once it's not sharp anymore, it's not great. So that's why I figure the little throwaway ones are better for, like, get on Temu and get 100 or whatever of them, and they're not expensive. Or like I said, I just use my knife. It's just a retractable hobby knife. I have expensive sharp. I've got an electric, one you put the pencil in and it's like, and it's amazing. Works great for the harder pencils. But again, my Stabilos, and I've had it before you put it in, and it just eats away. And before you know it, because your pencil keeps breaking, before you know it, you've got half a pencil left because it's electric and it just chews them. So I stopped using that. So so I would. It's a question that so many people struggle with. But I always just go back to my knife. So it's a good idea to maybe learn how to sharpen a pencil with a knife, because you don't have to, you've got one knife and that's it. You don't have to keep buying anything else. And I find I can sharpen, like some students will have a pencil that just keeps breaking every time they're trying to sharpen it. And the minute I do it with a knife, it doesn't break. So I feel that, I don't know what it is. They just don't seem to break as much. What's Lynn got? The last 4 refill blades I bought from my swordfish from Amazon looked used and would not sharpen anything. Oh, that's terrible. With the sword, the crank handle one as well. I'm just going to see if I've got it here. No. Just because some of you may not know what I'm talking about. I don't know. I must have put it away in a cupboard or something. But yeah, they're like a little box and they have a handle. The other thing I hate about them is when your lead does break in them, you have to dismantle the whole thing, pull it all apart to get the lead out to be able to put another pencil in. At least with one of these, when the lead breaks in there, all you got to do is get something sharp and push it out. Whereas the crank ones, I don't have time for that. When I'm busy painting and I need to sharpen a pencil, I want it sharpened straight away so I can keep going, not spend, the next 10 minutes pulling a sharpener apart to try and get it to work again. So, no, not a fan. Was when I first bought it, thought it was great, but that was the bit that really put me off of those. So, all right. I think I've pretty much covered everything. So we went through why soft pastels are pure pigment with just enough binder to hold them together. We also discussed that they're not chalk. They're far more vibrant and light fast. They reflect light brilliantly, which is why they seem to glow on paper. And if you ever see when we went to the Glover Prize the year before last, there was a beautiful pastel work. It wasn't very big, of some of the if you've ever seen the Bay of Fires in Tasmania, they're these big sort of rock or boulders that have got like bright reds in them. And this was a pastel piece of the Bay of Fires of some of the rocks, and it was all done in stick with no blending. And you could tell when you're walking along, it just was so vibrant, just beautiful. So when you compare it to other paintings, like other mediums, and you'll notice that if you go to galleries and see different pastel works and stuff. So, and then, of course, they come in sticks, pencils, and pans. Each one has its own use, and there's a wide range of softness across all the brands that really give you a lot of creative freedom. So they're my favorite medium for a reason. So whether you're laying fur or painting feathers or capturing like sunlight on sand dunes or oceans, you can do all of it with soft pastels. and really make them come to life. And I also love that they're beginner friendly, which is why I think I teach in the soft pastels, because they're my favorite, but they're also great for beginners because they're just so forgiving. You can keep building up layers as long as you use a light touch. That's paper is the main number one, and then a light touch is number two. So you can kind of cover up mistakes because you're building layers. So a color might not be quite right in your first layer, but you can fix it by bringing in more color and different layers. Or if it's that bad, you can get sticky tape and remove it, or a rubber and pull it out. The idea to fix the mistake is, or if you get to a point you have clogged your paper a bit, you want to get that pastel back off. On a sander paper, you can use a brush and brush it back off, whereas on pastel mat, a brush doesn't really work as well. So I find a kneadable eraser or sticky tape, and you've just got to get that pastel back out of the paper quite gently so you're not wrecking the paper, and then you can come back in and go again. And then if you're using pastel mat, if all else fails, you can wash it off and start again. Okay, so plus they're versatile in that you can even add water and turn them to paint if you want. So there's so many ways to use soft pastels, and I think that's why I really love them so much. Yeah, so Odette said she has no patience either. No, don't have patience for that. I have plenty of patience when it comes to painting or drawing an art piece. I don't have patience with messing around with other things, sharpeners especially. So, all right, guys. So don't forget, if you haven't already clicked that video link, go up and do that now if you want to watch that 15 minutes, because when I stop the live, you're not going to be able to see it. For those on Instagram, I'm not sure. Ricky. Hi, Ricky. I'm on Instagram. That's awesome. You still have my painting. Hey, so good. I haven't seen you for years. I'm not sure if I can share. Oh, actually, I might be able to share this link. Okay, this is the link. So if you're in Facebook, hold on. If you're in Facebook, just scroll up the chat. I'm going to try and put this into post. All right, I've put the link in the Instagram comments, okay? So for anyone who didn't join me right at the start, it's a 15-minute video on the Henry Rocher company in Paris, and how it's the two ladies. The one is a descendant, it's his niece, or great niece, I think. Yeah, it must be great niece. And she's still using, like, in the shop, created. She's brought the pastels back to life because they started to decline the business. And it's a fascinating watch to see how they hand make their pastels. So yeah, but once I stop the live, you won't get that link, unfortunately. For those in the Creative Barn membership, I'll share. You guys would have already seen it because it was in our Facebook group, but I will put it with this post. I'll also put it when I turn this into a blog. I might embed, if I can, the video into the blog post. Okay, so you should be able to watch it there. All right, but yes, definitely well worth it. So yeah, so thanks for joining me. If you do want to learn more about soft pastels, how to use them, how to paint realistic animals and nature, you can join me in the Creative Barn membership. I haven't got a link for you at the moment. It's too late for links, but it's just the creativebarnmembership.com, and you can go and check that out. I do have a free 7-day trial at the moment. So, all right, guys, once again, thanks for joining me this week. And I hope that, I know a lot of you guys on here do already use soft pastels, but I hope that's given you a bit more information about them. And for those that have never used them, I hope that has sparked your interest to give them a go. All right. Thanks again, everyone, for joining me. And I will see you all next Tuesday. Bye.